So the patch notes are here for the global server, update 3.23. This confirms many of the things that we covered in our previous two videos on the Korean patch notes. However, it has a few interesting extra additions. For example, we'll actually be able to get Relic and Ice Crystals through the trials as well. But there are also a few concerning things that they failed to include in the patch notes. We'll have to check out later. First of all, we can see downtime will be at the usual times and last about 4 hours. So 400 ornate coins. And this will also bring the double archboss spawns. This simply means we'll get twice as many archbosses at once. So all of them at every archboss time slot. You'll be able to go to the exact one you want every single time. Although 3 will be peace and 1 will be guild. But they do also hint at potentially increasing their difficulty, probably just boosting their hit points. As they say, take on the challenge against these even more formidable archbosses. That does indeed allude to they are stronger. When we saw them do this to the field bosses, they basically added damage reduction to them, so it would take us longer to kill them. They didn't necessarily have increased hit points, they simply just took half as much damage. All your damage numbers were halved. If this comes to the archbosses, this is very concerning for the classes which rely on damage from wand. Curse Explosion is affected by that damage reduction twice. And that, I would say, is a bug because it's only in this particular instance. No other PvE content is this the case. And that heavily affects any class using wand. And it is especially important that they fix that, since they are also going and finally addressing the Teant orbs. They will no longer stack indefinitely. You could in fact, as the secret is, stack these as many as you want against the target and obtain thousands of debuff duration against the target, multiplying your curse explosions like more than tenfold. It could get crazy numbers. It was just a matter of how many people actually had the orb. And if you were to create a min-max trial group, everybody would have one. But they are finally addressing that. As stated here, it will be capped at 60%. So you'll only want one orb in the group, unless you can't for some reason manage 100% uptime, because you may not have enough cooldown to cast Star Destroyer and Supernova often enough to keep the debuff active. But yes, it will result in groups no longer being able to abuse stacking all the Teant orbs, but will also mean it's more important than ever that they fix that Curse Explosion bug just on those field bosses, and it may very well be coming to arch bosses now. As for those PvP balance changes, I went over them in depth in the previous videos. We're getting those heal reduction effects confirmed to no longer be affected by weaken resistance. That includes on the daggers throwing knives, greatswords, guillotine blade, and the staffs infernal meteor or hellfire rain. However, they are adding a counter to this. They are including now in the longbow's purifying touch that they can cleanse those heal reduction effects despite them not being considered a weaken effect. Looking on the Korean server, you can see the priority list there. The first priority is confinement removal, then movement restrictions, and then weaken effects. We can also see here an extensive list of all the abilities now that simply will bypass shield block chance. So even if you have 100% shield block chance, these will completely ignore it, thus adding a lot more abilities now that should much more easily be able to deal damage to tanks. They confirm that change with counter barrier. It now has more than double the cooldown, but the duration has been increased to 8 seconds. I did point out before, if you do manage to hit the stat caps, which is kind of unrealistic, you would still be able to get 100% uptime on counter barrier. And even if you say only have 100% on those stats, you're still going to get pretty good uptime. But it will shake up your playstyle, necessitating movement in combat. So when you don't have your counter barrier up, you might want to disengage for a few seconds before you get it back. There's also that big change to moral boost. It will no longer grant cooldown reduction to survival and tactics skills, and resilience mind will no longer give you as much mana. On Orb, the movement from Distortion Veil is nerfed to 15%. Temporal Leap properly has the description that it only affects attack and control skills, and it itself has been changed from a mobility type skill to a survival skill. Therefore, you will no longer be able to use Moral Boost to reduce the cooldown of Temporal Leap. And yes, that's where they list the Heaven Orb nerf, capped at 60%. And what was not mentioned in the Korean patch notes is a buff to Vampiric Strike. They're increasing the specialization against shield health from 320% damage to 540%. Despite not being announced for the Korean server, it has indeed been updated here. Additionally, Crossbow's weak point shot, the damage has been increased with that shield specialization from 500% to 700%. That also has been updated on the Korean server. And people were also reporting that the shield reduction effect, where you reduce the shield received by 80%, was not being affected by debuff duration. So you weren't able to reduce that time. That may still be the case. Moving on, they're discontinuing marketing support in the languages of French, Brazilian, Portuguese, and Latam Spanish. They claim to appreciate your patience, but patience for what? They probably will not be bringing these back. Simply budget cutting, removing those. As for Battlegrounds, there are some map updates. They're adding a secondary exit paths to both spawns, adding some new structures. The battlefield defense buff now lasts 7 seconds when you exit the spawn area, and they're adjusting those levers. You also, when capturing a stone, get a reduction to your evasion, in addition to CC resistances. As for Tower of Greed, we have seen on the Korean server that they've updated the rewards, and they are very, very underwhelming. You can see an exact comparison here, Season 1 versus Season 2. They basically didn't change anything, except removing the Relic Analysis crystals, quadrupling the weapon mastery, but adding new gear chests and new health potions. Just to have a closer look at those gear chests, you can see there's one here with accessories, and these are all the accessories available, so not exactly anything amazing. As for the armor chests, you get those here, you get 2 of them, and all it has is this stuff, nothing more. It would be great if it had the veiled gloves, that would be awesome, but no. The reason they claim that they are removing the Relic Analysis crystals from the Tower of Greed is to literally make it so that we will have reduced pressure to complete this content. They are literally saying you do not have to play this content in the current state. We are just improving the rewards a tiny bit for newer players, and that's it. They understand people are reluctant to do it with just these measly rewards, so they're pretty much saying, right, don't do it at all. We'll work on updating it for the future, but for now, here's some small tidbits if you are a brand new player. Maybe you can get as far as Dusk to get all those gear chests. And there are some bonus rewards if you want to go all the way to the end, claiming the title Pioneer of Greed. So yeah, the devs will be reworking the Tower of Greed. That's what Tico said, like changing it up completely. But for now, they're simply changing the rewards so you don't feel like you have to do it, and just adding some gear for some new players. However, those Relic Analysis crystals you can now get in other areas. And what we hadn't noticed, because it wasn't mentioned as far as I've seen in the Korean patch notes, is they've actually added them to trial accumulated point rewards. You can get a total of 40 of them per week just by doing your trials, which you should be doing anyway to get all these extra runes and these coins and stuff. Most of you were already doing them, so this is pretty cool bonus rewards just for doing PvE content you do already. If you want to do some extra content, get some extra stones, you can go to PvP. There is Nebula, farm some mobs, and you'll get another 40 here. It is quite a bit of a grind though, and then if you want to spend all your battleground coins, you can get another 40 here. But on from there, there's the announcement that the double Lucent packs will be going away on February the 28th. You will no longer be able to obtain them. These were never added to the Korean server, which is quite interesting, at least on the Taiwan server here. They just aren't a thing. They only have these. So I'm pretty sure it was just a marketing strategy for the global server. But yeah, if you want to be getting double the amount of Lucent for the money that you spend on this game, get those packs before February the 28th. It was very likely just to test the waters, and otherwise some people were saying potentially to inject more Lucent into the economy, as it was kind of drying up. Traits were selling for nothing, and so even as free to play, it was super hard to get Lucent. At least it's a bit easier now as things sell a little bit higher, but that will all be tapering out once these packs are gone on the 28th. And yes, they do confirm that Raid Blessing pouch, where we could exchange our entropy shards for a trait, is been changing over to a selection chest. However, these packs will still be limited to 1 per week, cost 30 entropy shards, but at least you'll be able to select which gear piece, which weapon you'll actually get the traits dropping in. So should definitely reduce the overall price of the traits you want, since most people are using the same heroic items, like gloves, rings, and weapons vary a bit more, but still there's quite a few which we don't generally use as an heroic weapon. But ultimately, that's it for the update details here for update 3.23. What is quite interesting is they failed to mention anywhere about the new addition to the tooltips, at least on the Korean server, that these skills will now add recovery overload stacks, which, if I'm to guess what they will do, is basically add a debuff. So the more stacks you have of this recovery overload, the less healing you will receive. And so if you're continually getting spammed heals on top of, you'll just receive less and less healing until you wait maybe 5 seconds and all the stacks will be gone before you get healed again. But that is just a guess. And again, they do not mention these in our patch notes at all. So they may just be, for now, a tooltip update, because I'm not seeing, when I cast any of these skills, any debuff added to my bar that would allude to what this recovery overload is. And testing these abilities on myself, I cannot see any reduction to my overall healing, no matter how many heals I spam. So with that said, thanks for watching, and we'll see you guys tomorrow.